Thank you so much. We did have a lot of fun kind of planning for this, and I promised to the panel to be provocative, as I have been through this conference. And I'm going to start out by saying, and Tim, thank you very much for kind of kicking us off on this. I'm going to use you as an example here, so don't be. So, why should anyone listen to us here on the panel about leadership? We all read the same HBR, we all listen to the same gurus, and we all do sort of leadership development through different stages of lead yourself, lead your team, et cetera, et cetera. These are all, classic, let's give it a good name, classic formulas. So what makes you qualified to sit here on the stage and tell this very informed group that you could be trusted on the leadership of anyone? And that's a surprise question.
I wonder.
A big surprise question. Well, I've no idea really. But I guess I was excited to come here because I am incredibly, well, I'm learning with all these amazing people, and all of you here, but I'm also incredibly passionate about social justice and equity and diversity and inclusion and accessibility. And I think that we're interested to talk about how we can ensure that in the years to come, every single leadership organisational space has every single kind of person from every cultural background, physical ability, unique perspective, and that's celebrated. And I believe that that will lead to really innovative organisations that performance is achieved seamlessly. I'm going to reflect on something that I just said 10 minutes ago. I don't like the state of the universe. I don't like it. I studied gendered leadership when I was back at university in my 40s to understand how did we get here and what can we do different. So I would really like to work to empower more women into positions of power, real positions of power, that are deciding what products are in the market, what employees are hired, and how we're running the world, how we're looking at the future, the environment. And I take a lens of psychology. I think people are incredibly fascinating and complex. And if you're interested later, I could break down both people and human behavior into a mathematical equation. We're very complex and we're imperfect as humans. And I'd like to imagine a world that has a little bit more equality in decision-making positions to see, can we maybe do it better? Can we get it right for the future of our children and their children? Because I don't like what we have right now.
I'm going to give a provocative answer to your provocative questions. So you should listen to me because I know nothing. And I used to teach in MBA programs, fancy university programs, and I realized they're basically extended coffee breaks that accomplish almost nothing, right? And I stopped doing them. And I stopped reading leadership books, I stopped understanding leadership theory, and started studying meditation and spiritual practice. So inviting my clients into a space of not knowing. And when you hear their stories, you realize how difficult their jobs actually are. And it's amazing that anyone can even do the job, and it wasn't a book that we created. And so I said, I know a lot of things. I have 4 degrees, I've studied a lot of these things, but I come now from an empty mind. How do I help this person find what's next for them to take at least one step forward in a direction that matters to them? And part of that thing will invite new understandings of what leadership actually means. We have some really broken models of what it means to even lead and to just perpetuate the problem. But I think we're in this space now where the woman that runs the university program here where I live in Amsterdam, their average tenure of their CEO students is 18 months. That's how fast they're cycling through companies. Because no one really knows what's happening. And so I've decided I'm going to come from a place of not knowing.
I like what the Kyoto agreed because Socrates said that. I know that I don't know anything. And it's really similar to what I'm going to say because what we experience is an acceleration of things at Ali with AI, which is of course a huge chance, and there are a lot of benefits there. But if you also observe people, you see that this acceleration overwhelms. They need to take very complex decisions much more on the day than before. And then they have fear. They don't understand what it does make with them. And that's where also like kind of vulnerability comes in place, because we had examples where people used AI and challenged their leaders, and the leader must be open, saying, okay, I was wrong, it's okay that I was wrong, let us see what AI said, and let's think about how we can make it better. And I think this is, for me, also key to come back, like I want that we are coming back down to earth all. We need grounding, we need mindfulness, we need deceleration for all people. And it's not only about profits.
So, just to connect the dots, so we all agree that David said the importance of the beginner's mind, right? Always ready to start with a clean slate. Love the passion and commitment that we bring in, and that kind of informs what we're doing. And obviously, going back to the very first conversation we had here about the importance of philosophy, even if we go back to Socrates, that's where coaching practice starts, right? A lot of teaching starts with the Socratic dialogue, right? That's with questioning, etc. And you know what happened to Socrates? I mean, he was killed. He was killed. Yeah. So we all have to be prepared.
He took
And
the decision himself.
taking Tim as a case study for us, right? I mean, yeah, he knew all the models, etc., and he was ready to drop them all and start out with a new and a fresh and a brand new approach. So, going forward and reflecting critically why we ended up to your very good point, where we are, where we've been toiling in this leadership space. How many books, David? Hundreds and hundreds of thousands. Some people are more successful than others.
Yeah.
Why have we not reached that awareness? And what didn't work in the way we approached leadership before? Why is there so much performative leadership than the effective leadership out there?
I tried to break it down to one aspect that I also mentioned in my speech this morning. Like, we focused in the past when it comes to leadership developments on what leaders do, like communication, how to set goals, how to coach people, what leadership styles are out there, and that you need actually an adaptive one, and so on. But we did not focus on who you are. And I think this self-awareness is key. It was always key for leadership, but now it gets another importance, because when you talk about biases and all that kind of stuff, and you don't have a self-awareness, believe what AI says you, or whatever you hear, and this is a huge risk in my eyes, and that's why I think self-awareness is the thing that we should focus on for the future.
Yeah, I agree with everything that you're all saying, and I think that self-awareness is also connected to that importance of humility more than ever, and the self-awareness in the moment, and to connect to what Tim was talking about being, the enjoyment of painful growth. I think that if we can invite everybody to be comfortable in the uncomfortable, to be openly vulnerable, to say to people in organisations, I'm not, like you said, that sort of not knowing mindset, and have sort of a peacefulness when somebody's unsure and they're about to make a decision out of fear or trying to look successful or trying to increase profits, but they think, actually, I just need to pause for a moment and I just need to think it's okay for me to not know or ask or to regulate my central nervous system and then make a decision. Because I think fear is what makes us confrontational, and fear is what makes organisations toxic, and probably what's the reason for the political situation.
The man who built the once famous leadership programs at GE, and there's a long story behind all that. He had this great quote when he was reflecting on this journey there. He said, "We need to stop sending changed people back to unchanged environments, because the environment always will." And so a lot of our efforts are futile in the end. That's why I stopped teaching these programs. People within 24 hours can be vertical behaviors for the most part. And so for me, when I developed integrated development theory, because I said we need to get people involved in changing their environment to make it easier for them to be at their best more often. Spent 3 years working with PwC in Australia. One of the research projects we did is why do women not become partners? And they all dropped out at exactly the same point in the process. When it got into the structure that was highly masculinized, they either had to conform to that type, or they would just drop out. And so we built systems, we built commercial enterprises and capitalist systems that favor certain kinds of leaders. And so it's no surprise then that those people are more successful. And it's not that others can't do that, but if we wanted to actually have more diverse leaders, we need to fundamentally rethink the economics by which we organize our lives.
How do we choose our leaders? It's not very transparent, isn't it? Is it? So, anybody working in HR, raise your hands. Okay. Yeah. If you have some insights into how do we choose our leaders in the private sector? Maybe we have to have a little bit more transparency on people's values. So we're trying to bring some more transparency into competencies with competency frameworks, personalities with personality profilings. What about their values? What about what have they done as humans? What are their interests? What is their motivation? If we could get a little bit more transparency there, maybe we can choose better leaders. Maybe we put different criteria. Maybe we could make it a little bit more democratic at work. Oh, how many times would I have wished that as an employee I could raise my hand and pick the next person that's going to lead the team? Maybe if we had a bit of a better definition of leadership. It's not entitlement, it shouldn't be a position of power.
I'll try to connect the dots here, and throw something in your way. How about fellowship? We teach leaders, but do we educate followers? Do we, Kelly, back to you, choosing leaders. Some of us have choices, some don't, but we always have a choice to follow a certain way. And I personally think that we do not really train people to follow. And we all have to follow. In order to be, we have to follow. So have you given any thoughts in your organization, David, in your teaching and in your personal work? Do you help people understand what fellowship is? Yeah.
To the first part of your question, so we are currently undergoing an agile transformation. As I said before, our people do have the responsibility, it's given already, but not everybody takes it because they are leaders, etc. Maybe they also cut them down when they try to take decisions, but often we also observe that they are not doing it. They are in a consumption kind of attitude, and they want someone else taking decisions and leading themselves. We are not trying to see everyone as a leader. Like, it's not the first attempt. We did that also in the past. So we're saying you are the driver of your own development and you're the driver of your own area of expertise. And this is something that we repeat again and again and again. And in all the trainings we have incorporated that. And with the agile approach now it comes and hits us even stronger. And we still see that there is a struggle and it is a process. It's nothing that you switch like the light. It's a process of years, but I think we are on the way to do that. Yeah, that's about the first part.
So just two things. One is that adults don't have a safe place to practice. So they don't get better because they're not willing to take the risk in public of looking dumb or making a mistake. And yet we teach them these things and then somehow imagine that they will magically go and do that, and most don't. So I think part of we need to create spaces in which people get to try out new things and to co-develop. Part of following is I have to learn to trust you. And I have to learn to depend on you. It's not about going out on some weekend and then coming back. It's like, the team, let's work on this together. The second thing is, one of my favorite programs I ever used to be involved in was an Emerging Leaders program of people on the cusp of stepping into that highest level. And their fundamental question or concern was, I'm afraid of who I will become. Because they looked at the ones around them and said, I don't want to be like that. And I remember one young man, his wife, they were having their third child, and he was like the golden child. He was being groomed for this thing, and he said, but then I'll miss this. And so he said, I'm going to stay at the level I'm at, which was then never done. No one had ever turned down that opportunity. He said, but I'm not willing to give up myself to go do this. And so we want the kind of leaders we need to be more diverse, need to see openings to be a leader in a different way. And if we're asking leaders, we all conform to our environment. We're all from different cultures, but we find a norm about how to be together at a conference. Why? Because we're professionals and we kind of figure it out. Things we might have done at home, we don't do here. And so I think our leaders are walking into environments which reinforce often the very behaviors we then try to teach out of them to evolve into something else. And so for me, I just want to be more involved in imagining how do we organize ourselves, create new role models so people can see other options about how to lead.
Oh, when I think about how leadership has had to evolve from the industrial age and even maybe when my parents were leaders, where the style was quite autocratic, directive, top-down. The leader was expected to have the answers. I would like to hope that we're slowly moving into a different model where leaders can be more coach-like. I battle with that's even the word follower. I have a boss. I don't follow. I challenge him. I don't see my role as being a yes person. I see my role as, am I finding my voice to give my opinion? Because the work world has become so complex, they need to hear everybody's voice. So I'd like to see a leadership model where it's more coach-like and that autocratic directive top-down, I have the answers is gone. So even the principle of leader follow, I can't relate to it anymore.
And it's assuming a follower has a certain definition, right? I didn't imply direct subordination. I implied a much more dynamic relationship between the person who is in a leadership position and the person who is on the team. And really appreciate the point about, technology can actually help us bridge that traditional social distance divide that the social structures, the human structures have along, David, and you pointed that out very well. And so I think that pejorative treatment of followership is actually undermining, to a certain extent, leadership itself. because it has to be a mutually respectful relationship. And I do appreciate the point you're just making, David, that because people don't want to become the leaders they see in front of them, they may be retreating into discovering their own purpose. And what we coaches provide is a safe place for them to be who they want to be. But how do we catapult them into, yes, connecting with who they are, but at the same time not being afraid to change their environment so that it becomes better for everyone else. So it's not just a personal leadership mantra and personal leadership journey. Oh, I found my goal, I found my purpose, I feel good about myself, I have a wonderful coach who I talk to every once in a while, or AI, whatever. But what about all of the rest, right? Isn't leadership about changing a system, changing the environment for the better of more people?
Yeah, I think building on what all of you were saying, something that comes to mind is kind of the solution-focused leadership philosophy, which isn't just about focusing on solutions for it. It's more kind of nuanced than that and philosophical. And I think something there is about organisations celebrating each person's particular quality exactly as it already is, and recalibrating the structure and the system so that people can play to their strengths, noticing what works already, and also collaborating and feeling safe to disagree on articulating shared visions for companies so that it's really clear and easy to progress, and also people are starting from a position of being noticed and seen as they are in that moment, as opposed to how they need to be performatively.
Okay, very good. So we have to wrap this up on a positive note, right? But however, in the good spirit of just taking us all the way in the other direction and kind of challenging ourselves and asking challenging questions, I think it's really, really important. So, do you see the coming new generation technology, and I know some of you don't want to talk about technology specifically as a solution, but I think Tim demonstrated to us, again, I'm going to take him as an example, how this new tool or new tools that are coming to us can actually help us bridge that gap and take us to the next level. So what's next, without repeating what we already said about the good traditional values of leadership? What's new on the horizon that can get us to the next level? Stella?
I can try, technology is not that my focus area. I think the thing with AI is the scalability, so you can provide now coaching to everyone who wants. But again, you need that awareness, because I have a coachee in my mind, a leader from us. She did not know who she is. She did not know how she acts. She did not even were able to, look at herself on a meta level and reflect herself. And what would she prompt then to the AI? And this is the risk I see. But on the other hand, for people who might have an uncertainty or using a coach to reflect some things, we can think about VR rooms, that there are lots of opportunities where you can practice all that kind of stuff that is expected from you without having someone looking at you. Because I think that there is a lot of opportunity that I can't grasp already, but I see the chance in it.
One of the things that really surprised me, my dad was a leader, so I had some semblance of what they did when I grew up, but at a very different time. But one of the things that surprised me when I started working with leaders was how lonely most of them feel. And there's nowhere where they feel safe to turn, unless they have a partner at home or a friend, but even that is hard. They definitely carry burdens. And so for me, I think one of the things is doing more emergent support for them. So it's the Keystone body of work built on Vygotsky's notion of zones of possible development. Small micro interventions and real change. And then that's where I think AI can be quite helpful as a conversational companion. Like, I'm about to go into this meeting with my adversary that I need him for this project. I'm petrified. I usually end up yelling at him, trying to bully him to cooperate. It's not working. But actually, rehearse some things for a few minutes, get some feedback. And so, and I think it doesn't solve the loneliness problem around human connection, but it builds skills that people then can take to human relationships. And I think that can be very advantageous for many reasons.
I'll keep it really short. I am actually very hopeful that with the information that we have today about what good leadership is, that we're raising the bar, and that we as individuals are getting better at choosing the people that we want to work with. So I am very hopeful that that's what's been enabled.
Okay, well, I guess talking about AI and this subject and the hopefulness, I think if, hopefully when, we can use AI to do all of those things that are process-driven, that maximise efficiency, that benefit organisations, that frees up time for people to do more in-depth work, to align to their values, to focus on the ethics of their organisation. Also, one of the things about leadership is I think with AI, if we can use it, we were talking yesterday about the cult of a leader and how quickly that spreads, of toxic leaders, how quickly that spreads with the use of social media. So it's our job, I think, all of us here, we have to use social media in the same way to create a cult of positive and inspiring leadership and use our connections to do that.
So I want to thank the panelists for staying on top of my challenging questions. But why don't we use AI as a leadership gym? You mentioned, Kelly, that you go to the gym to practice your brain. You know, we can use AI to practice leadership in a safe place. Thank you all very much. Thank you.